So I think Ethereum between now and year end, let's say Bitcoin is 2x upside from here. I think Ethereum is more than 2x upside from here. So I think that there's maybe at least a 50% chance Ethereum's network value flips Bitcoin.
월가 출신의 대표 전략가이자 펀드 스트렛의 공동 창립자 톰 리가 올해 암호화폐 시장에 대한 날카로운 분석을 내놓았습니다. 현 시장은 과연 어디로 향할 것인지 그의 통찰을 함께 살펴보시죠.
Can you maybe explain what led to the concept of a 4-year cycle? And then do you think that still continues today?
Yeah. Well, I think when people talk about a crypto cycle and it being 4 years, there's probably some reflexivity at work because the original genesis was that, Bitcoin had a halving cycle. And so people were talking about a price cycle that really followed a Bitcoin in the halving. But in crypto, as you know, because there isn't a company, it's decentralized, and there's no centralized source of information, price itself often becomes really important, especially in the early days. So I think that there was a lot to people looking at patterns and then markets trading on those patterns. And the reality is that it's still true in the equity world because I can't tell you how many of our institutional clients still look at seasonality, which is just applying a calendar to what price action could be, either whether it's credit or volatility or equity. So every element of liquid markets today. I think that there is probably some credence because many people are positing that the 4-year cycle may not be in place anymore. Everybody from Bitwise, to David Bailey, so a lot of OGs, and that has to do with the fact that the incremental buyer of Bitcoin is no longer retail, which was really the story from inception up until probably 2024. And so now in the last 2 years, there's now institutional allocations taking place into crypto. And because of that, it's probably counter-cyclical.
We heard the same thing or something similar in the last cycle. Everyone was talking about a super cycle back then. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be correct. What would you be looking at as indicators or at least this year to see whether we will continue seeing a 4-year cycle beyond obviously the price movement?
Well, our crypto strategist, Selferral, still writes about the 4-year cycle. It probably doesn't matter between now and the end of the year because in any case that we should be seeing a lot of strength. But I would say that the real test, there's really 2 tests that will come up. Is one, is Bitcoin going to follow a price cycle next year, which would be a downturn? And is Bitcoin going to diverge from the equity markets next year? And I think that there's a chance that both take place, and that's why we'll be talking less about a cycle because as you know, Bitcoin also historically followed equity markets pretty closely too.
Interesting. Just for the audience, so if we do go through a 4-year cycle for people outside of crypto, that means that by the end of this year, if we look at previous cycles, we should see the beginning of a bear market and a pretty significant correction. But now that the herd is here, what would that correction look like?
Yeah, again, and now we're being theoretical because I'm not necessarily calling for a correction or a crypto winter. The past crypto winters have been really painful. Drawdowns or declines for Bitcoin from the peak of more than 70%, maybe 90%. And the altcoins and non-Bitcoin doing far worse. I would say that it's not just institutions that are coming and buying Bitcoin now. I think that there is sovereign purchases of Bitcoin taking place. And, the U.S. government, while hasn't completely articulated its strategy for building a Bitcoin strategic reserve, but we know the U.S., when oil prices are low, they are a stabilizer for oil because they are filling that SPR or strategic petroleum reserve at low prices. And that always puts a floor for oil. If Bitcoin enters a winter and the U.S. pursues a budget neutral strategy to acquire Bitcoin, that means there'll be really active buyers of Bitcoin at lower prices. So if you always have a buyer at lower prices, you're kind of bounding your downside.
톰 리는 비트코인의 4년 주기설이 반감기에서 비롯되었다는 점을 인정하면서도 이제는 단순한 공급 충격만으로 설명하기는 어렵다고 봅니다. 최근 시장의 핵심 변화는 기관 투자자와 국가 차원의 참여입니다. 그는 미국 정부의 전략적 비축유 사례를 비유로 들며 만약 비트코인 가격이 급락하는 구간에서 국가나 기관이 장기적 전략에 따라 매입한다면 그 자체가 가격 하방의 완충장치 역할을 한다고 설명합니다. 즉, 과거 주기는 개인 심리와 패턴 인식에 좌우됐다면 앞으로는 구조적으로 저가 구간에 등장하는 안정적 수요층이 존재하기 때문에 과거처럼 70에서 90% 폭락을 반복할 가능성은 줄어들었다는 주장입니다. 따라서 톰 리는 4년 주기의 영향력이 약화될 수 있으며 향후 비트코인의 사이클은 기관 자금 유입과 정책적 매수 전략에 의해 새로운 형태로 재편될 수 있다고 전망합니다.
Do you think that AI could end up solving the debt problems that we're all facing now?
Yes, because in a way, again, I'm not trying to break the laws of like what's legally contractual obligations, but I think we're seeing microcosms of how debt problems get solved through something as simple as a stable coin, because we know that the stable coin, which is backed by actual dollars, but it, as we all know, it becomes circular because it's a dollar. But the stable coin issuer is then taking the pledged assets to buy treasuries. They're becoming a buyer of treasuries. So in other words, like stablecoins are providing essentially a permanent financial stability, because the largest holder of U.S. treasuries today is just Japan with 1.1 trillion of treasury holdings. I may not even be that large. So it's not that many orders of growth before stablecoins are larger than Japan as holding U.S. treasury. Yeah, and then the second thing to keep in mind is that if central banks create digital currencies, and there's different forms, but let's say the Fed does do a true CBDC where every American has an account with the Fed. So if they want to do monetary easing, they may not do interest rates anymore. They might just drop dollars into your bank account. And then if they need to tighten monetary policy, they can pay interest on that. And then if they want to tighten policy, they can take away the money. So in that world, there's probably no longer a yield curve as well. I mean, in a way, like long-term debt, almost like a theoretical construct, because I'm not sure there's necessarily a long-term yield curve.
So that firmly puts you in the camp, Tom, that it's a huge problem. It's going to be solved with liquidity, AI, solutions. You're not in the camp that we can have a deflationary spiral. The human intervention will forever be there. I mean, crypto should do well.
Let's talk about ETH in general. Why has ETH lagged so far in the cycle? What's changed over the last few months?
I think ETH, ETH lagged last 5 years because it went through a big transition. I mean, it's ETH now is not the same ETH it was in 2017 because they moved to proof of stake, and then they had many changes implemented and maybe guided by the foundation, Ethereum Foundation, that were not necessarily friendly to improving the economics of Ethereum itself. But I think that a lot of that changed this year. So I think Ethereum sort of adjusted its own internal problems, including, improving the inflation rate, et cetera. So there's not too much ETH floating. And then the second thing that, of course, has happened, because there's two other tailwinds for ETH, is that stablecoins have really gained a lot of popularity, and it's caught the notice of Wall Street, but it's also been caught the notice of the U.S. administration, which, signed the Genius Act, and now the SEC signed Project Crypto, which is really impelling the financial system, like Wall Street basically, to start building on the blockchain. And the third, of course, which is coming, but I think people are recognizing it, that in the world of LLMs and agentic AI, especially with real-world robots, AI is going to become a lot more sophisticated. Because remember, if you're training AI on vision, like actually not just internet, Tinder, and Facebook messages, but actually like it's in the real world, you're increasing a vastly amount of information, but then it's also making it harder to verify and secure, who's really issuing instructions. And that's where blockchains and zero knowledge proof become important. Well, that's a third sort of story arc. All of this should benefit the most reliable smart contract platform, which is Ethereum. And it has zero downtime. Of course, it needs a lot of work to scale. It's scaling, but, to be super scaling. But what I found, especially because I've, been involved with crypto a long time, the crypto community kind of abandoned Ethereum in their minds because they thought faster was better, which was why Solana and Sui, and especially when you had the meme coins, those looked like the place where the economics were the best. If Wall Street is the reason we're going to see the next wave, Wall Street wants 100% uptime. They don't care about speed because they can build on the layer twos. And they actually find staking actually a virtue because that means the power law comes into effect. If Goldman stakes enough ETH, they have a positive voice on Ethereum itself and how they upgrade. Mm-hmm. And I was just at Salt, Wyoming last week, and I talked to a lot of the OGs I know, and I'm like, ETH's been kind of dead and price for 5 years, and it has been. And I said, is ETH actually inferior technologically, or do you think it's just the price action stunk and that's why you don't care about it? And almost all of them said it's because the price hasn't done well, especially compared to Bitcoin, that they don't care about it. So I think that's why this year and what's happening recently is actually an important moment for ETH because it is galvanizing the community again. And of course, if we can stay above the new highs, which is above 4,800, as you know, that means we could have a really big cycle for ETH.
톰 리는 부채 문제 해법으로 스테이블 코인과 CBDC를 주목합니다. 스테이블 코인은 담보 자산으로 미국 국채를 매입해 안정적 수요를 만들고 성장 속도에 따라 일본, 중국보다 더 큰 보유자가 될 수 있다고 분석합니다. 또한 CBDC 도입 시 금리 대신 개인 계좌에 직접 유동성을 투입 회수하는 방식으로 정책이 전환되며 이는 전통적 수익률 곡선을 무력화할 수 있다고 봅니다. 이어 그는 이더리움에 대해 지난 5년간 전환기와 가격 부진으로 외면받았지만 올해는 인플레이션율 개선, 스테이블 코인 확산, AI 영지식 증명의 수요 증가라는 세 가지 순풍이 결집했다고 강조합니다. 특히 월가는 속도보다 안정성과 100% 가동 시간을 중시하기에 이더리움이 차세대 사이클의 핵심 플랫폼이 될 수 있으며 $4,800 안착 여부가 중요한 분수령이 될 것이라고 전망합니다. 그리고 혹시 거래 수수료 절반을 다시 환급받는 방법 아직 모르시나요? 단 5분만 투자하면 평생 수수료 돌려받는 셀퍼럴, 선택이 아닌 필수입니다. 자세한 내용은 영상 더보기란을 확인해보세요.
If I put you on the spot, on the hot seat, where do you see crypto in the next 6 to 12 months, looking at Bitcoin, ETH, and the rest of the market?
Yeah. Well, I'm still really bullish on Bitcoin. I think between now and year end, I think it's still possible to be 200,000, and longer term, $1 million for Bitcoin. Ethereum, I think, has more upside because and that's why we call it the biggest macro trade over the next 10, 15 years because of both Wall Street building on the blockchain and AI as well. So you have sort of two cohorts actually probably deciding that it's really additive, right? Remember, the financial system is half of the economy. And in the stock market, financials are trading at a lower valuation than tech. So I think financials can re-rate in that world. But Ethereum is sort of the network value beneficiary. So I think Ethereum between now and year end, let's say Bitcoin is 2x upside from here. I think Ethereum is more than 2x upside from here. But longer term, in the BitMine presentation, we pulled some work from Mosaics. And let's say it's 5-year view for Ethereum, it comes to around $60,000 per ETH. So a lot of upside in the next 5 years.
Didn't you say you wouldn't be surprised there's a 50-50 chance that Ethereum could flip?
That's right. So I think that there's maybe at least a 50% chance Ethereum's network value flips Bitcoin.
오늘 영상 도움이 되셨다면 구독, 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 감사합니다.